The moment authority stopped working. Power is supposed to be reliable, predictable. When the president speaks, the system responds. That assumption sits at the core of the office itself. And yet, there was a moment when that assumption quietly collapsed. It didn't happen with defiance or rebellion. No one announced it. No law was broken. Authority simply failed to produce the outcome it was meant to guarantee. The machinery of command was engaged, the levers were pulled, and the expected result did not materialize. Not because the machinery was broken, but because the relationship between authority and response had fundamentally changed. To understand how authority stopped working, we have to rewind to a moment when pressure was already high, trust was fragile, institutions were strained. The presidency still held legal power, but legitimacy had begun to thin. Orders were issued the way they always had been, carefully worded, properly routed, fully authorized. And yet, the response was uneven, delayed, conditional, interpreted rather than executed. At first, this felt like friction, bureaucracy, normal resistance. But then a pattern emerged. Compliance was no longer automatic. Each directive required explanation. Each decision invited negotiation. What had once been a straightforward chain of command and compliance had become a complex web of conversation, persuasion, and conditional agreement. Inside the White House, unease spread. Authority had not been challenged openly, but it was no longer decisive. The system still listened, but it no longer moved with confidence. This was the moment everything changed, because power doesn't disappear when it's opposed. It disappears when it's questioned, and the nature of that questioning matters. It is not the loud challenge of open opposition, but the quiet skepticism of institutions that no longer automatically translate presidential words into coordinated action. And once authority has to justify itself before it can function, it has already lost something essential. That day marked the beginning of a new reality for presidency, one where influence mattered more than instruction and belief mattered more than command. The transition was not marked by any formal acknowledgement, but it was felt in every subsequent interaction between the office and the institutions it was designed to lead. The moment authority stopped working wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. Once the shift became noticeable, the presidency tried to compensate. Messaging intensified. Coordination increased. Legal clarity was reinforced. Everything possible was done to restore the old rhythm, where decisions flowed smoothly from the Oval Office outward. But the rhythm didn't return. Instead, every attempt to assert authority revealed how much it now depended on cooperation. Agencies asked for justification. Partners sought reassurance. Even allies wanted clarity before committing. This wasn't insubordination. It was uncertainty. And uncertainty is corrosive to power. It eats away at the assumptions that make authority functional, replacing automatic compliance with individual calculation. Each person and institution in the system begins evaluating directives through the lens of their own risk, rather than through the lens of institutional loyalty. The presidency could still command in theory, but in practice, each command required consensus. Each move invited hesitation. Each hesitation encouraged the next. Authority began to feel conditional, effective only where belief still existed. Inside the administration, strategies shifted. Directives were softened. Language became collaborative. Influence replaced instruction. These adjustments kept the system moving, but they also confirmed the loss. Because power that must persuade is no longer absolute. It has entered a different category of authority, one where every exercise of power requires an expenditure of political capital that was previously unnecessary. The office must now earn what it once simply commanded. What made this moment so dangerous was how quickly it normalized. No alarm sounded. No emergency reforms followed. Everyone adapted, because adaptation was easier than confrontation. And in that adaptation, authority slowly recalibrated downward. The presidency still mattered, but it no longer functioned as the unquestioned center of motion. That role had dissolved quietly, replaced by negotiation, alignment, and shared uncertainty. The moment authority stopped working didn't trigger collapse. It triggered adjustment. And adjustment, once accepted, becomes permanent. The system does not return to its previous state of automatic compliance. Once it has learned that compliance is negotiable, the memory of that learning persists, shaping how every future directive is received and evaluated. As adjustment became routine, the presidency entered unfamiliar territory. Power still existed, but it no longer moved first. It reacted. It waited. It calculated whether each action would succeed before attempting it. This is the invisible downgrade of authority. The office still occupies the center of the system, but its relationship to periphery has changed. Where once there was a direct line of command, there is now a network of negotiations, each one requiring energy and attention that was previously unnecessary. Inside the White House, decisions slowed not because leaders lacked resolve, but because certainty was gone. Every directive now carried a second question. Will this actually work? And if it doesn't, what does that reveal? That fear reshaped behavior. Instead of issuing clear commands, the presidency began testing responses, small moves, trial signals, carefully framed language designed to gauge reaction before commitment. Authority became experimental. The system noticed. Agencies grew more independent. Partners hedged. External actors sensed a hesitation and pushed further. Not aggressively, just enough to see where the boundary now sat. Each test that went unanswered moved a line. This wasn't a collapse. It was erosion, power thinning through constant recalculation. The presidency still occupied the center, but the center no longer pulled everything inward. And once authority becomes negotiable, it stops functioning as authority at all. It becomes influence, useful, necessary, but limited. By this stage, restoring the old model was impossible. You cannot unteach a system that compliance is optional. You cannot force belief back into place once it is cracked. The presidency had crossed into a new phase, one where leadership depended less on position and more on persuasion. By the time this shift was fully understood, there was no moment to reverse it. Authority had not failed catastrophically. It had adapted, and in doing so, changed its nature. The presidency survived. The office remained powerful, but it no longer operated as an unquestioned force. It functioned as a coordinator, a negotiator, a persuader, effective in many ways, but fundamentally different from before. This is why the moment authority stopped working still matters, because it revealed something uncomfortable. Power is not permanent. It is sustained by belief, repetition, and expectation. When those weaken, authority does not vanish. It transforms. Future presidents would inherit this reality. They would lead in a system where commands require buy-in, where influence matters more than instruction, where legitimacy must be renewed constantly, not assumed. Some would adapt well, others would struggle, but none would return to the old certainty. The presidency didn't lose power that day. It lost inevitability. And once inevitability is gone, leadership becomes harder, slower, and more fragile, no matter who holds the office. That is a legacy of the moment authority stopped working. Not collapse, but change. Subscribe to join the journey. The moment